Every settler in Blackstone Valley believed Elias Rowan had lost his mind. While every family split firewood and sealed their cabins for the hardest winter in memory, Elias spent his days planting tiny cedar trees across the frozen prairie. Not one, not 10, dozens, not in rows, not as a fence, in strange, uneven rings that made no sense to anyone. 3 months later, the deadliest blizzard in 40 years buried Blackstone Valley. Cabins vanished. Herds froze where they stood. And when the sky finally cleared, only one homestead remained untouched. Not the one with the strongest walls, not the one with the most firewood, the one surrounded by little trees. Because one man believed the wind could be taught. Before we continue, may I ask you a small favor? If you enjoy cinematic frontier stories like this, please consider subscribing. We're working hard to reach our very first 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps this channel keep bringing these forgotten stories back to life. Your support truly means more than you know. Now, let's travel back to the autumn of 1879. Autumn came early that year. Ice sealed the watering troughs before sunrise. The geese flew south 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And old Scout, the Rowan's gray-muzzled shepherd dog, had started doing something he only did before the worst storms. Every evening, he sat facing north, ears up, perfectly still, staring at a horizon that looked empty. Elias had learned long ago, when Scout watched the north was coming. Across the valley, axes rang from dawn to dusk. Families stacked firewood higher than their windows. But on the Rowan homestead, Elias knelt in the frozen dirt, lowering another young cedar into the ground, measuring, adjusting, checking every angle twice. His wife Clara watched from the porch, one hand resting on her growing belly. Their second child would arrive before winter ended, if winter allowed it. She asked the same question every evening. Shouldn't we be cutting more firewood? His answer never changed. We have enough. 9-year-old Noah didn't question his father. He carried the stakes, held the saplings, and copied every movement. Most fathers taught their sons to split logs. Elias taught Noah to read the wind. The wind isn't one thing, he told the boy, drawing lines in the frost. It's 1,000 little rivers. When a river hits a rock, it splits. Hit enough rocks, and it loses its strength. Noah frowned at the trees. So, we're building rocks? Elias smiled. No, we're teaching the wind to get lost. That afternoon, a freight wagon stopped at the property line. Silas Mercer climbed down, 27 winters on this frontier, a man who had buried friends inside cabins that became white tombs. He circled the cedar rings in silence. Then he asked the question the whole valley was asking. What exactly are you building? Elias didn't look up. I'm changing the wind. Silas stared at him. Then, slowly, he smiled, not because he agreed, but because he pitied him. The prairie doesn't care how clever a man thinks he is. When that wind comes, it takes whatever it wants. He climbed back onto his wagon and called over his shoulder. I hope your trees know how to stop a blizzard. Elias planted another cedar, then another, because inside his coat he carried a worn notebook, 15 winters of sketches, wind currents, snowdrifts, failures. That night, he finally showed it to Clara. You've been studying the wind for 15 years? I wasn't trying to predict it. I was trying to understand it. She asked the question that changed everything. And if you're wrong? His answer came as a whisper. If I'm wrong, our children won't live long enough for anyone to remember my name. Clara reached for his cold, cut hands. This wasn't stubbornness, it was conviction. She squeezed them. Then let's make sure you're right. But conviction would be tested. 5 times. The first test came within days. Elias released a handful of dry snow at the edge of the outer ring and watched it fly. Instead of splitting, one stream shot straight through a gap between 2 cedars and hit the cabin wall. His design had a hole in it. He spent 2 full days moving 11 trees, one at a time, until the snow he tossed into the air scattered like startled birds. Failure, correction. The second test came from the sky. A hard frost arrived weeks early, and the ground began turning to stone. 3 saplings snapped at the root as he forced them into half-frozen earth. So he changed his method, soaking each hole with hot water from the stove before planting, working by lantern light while the valley slept. Failure, correction. Then the wind itself went silent. One afternoon, the entire prairie simply stopped. No birds, no moving grass, and Scout stood at the north fence, hackles raised, and let out one long, low howl. He hadn't made that sound in 6 years, not since the storm that killed the Hendersons' cattle. Elias removed his hat and looked north. A dark wall stretched across the horizon. Not clouds, something heavier, something moving with purpose. He spoke the words Clara would remember for the rest of her life. It's coming. The storm announced itself as a sound, a low, endless roar like a freight train hidden beyond the horizon. Snow didn't fall, it flew sideways. Within minutes, the world outside the windows vanished. No horizon, no trees, no sky, only white. Inside, the cabin groaned, and Elias listened. The whistle of the wind, the breathing of the chimney. Then his face changed. Something was wrong. One gust had struck the wall with full force, a gust that should have been broken by the rings. He stood and reached for his coat. Clara's eyes widened. You'll die out there. If I don't understand what's happening, we all might. He tied a rope around his waist. If I'm gone longer than 5 minutes, pull. Quick pause, because what happens when that door opens is the reason this story exists. If your chest feels tight right now, that's exactly why we tell these stories. And if you want to hear how this family's night ends, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next one. Now. He opened the door. The blizzard swallowed him whole. Snow cut his face like broken glass. He fought his way to the outer ring, and there he saw something remarkable. The wind was breaking apart, splitting around every trunk, colliding with itself, dying. The storm was fighting itself. But then he found it. A narrow gap, a few feet wide, where one stream of air slipped through untouched, rebuilding its strength as it raced toward his family. The third test. He drove his shovel into the ground. Frozen solid, it refused to open. Correction, the sled. 20 yards away, half buried, lay 3 saplings he'd never planted. He fought his way there, lost sight of the rope, lost the sky, lost every direction, and found the sled by touch alone. He grabbed 2 trees. The third was already gone beneath the drift. There wasn't time. Inside, Clara counted. 4 minutes, 5. Her fingers tightened around the rope. Noah whispered, "Should I pull?" Every instinct screamed yes. But then Scout, who had been pacing the door all night, suddenly lay down. Calm. She stared at the dog and waited. Outside, Elias rammed the 2 saplings into the gap. No measuring, no spacing, only necessity. The next gust rushed the opening, struck the fresh trees, and exploded into spinning snow, scattering like water on hidden rocks. The rope went slack, not broken, released. The wind had let go. Minutes later, Elias stumbled through the door, beard frozen solid. Clara held him before his coat was even off. Did it work? He nodded. Then his expression darkened. This isn't the real storm. It's only the beginning. And beyond the northern ridge, a deeper roar answered him. The second wave was the one that buried homesteads. No one in Blackstone Valley slept that night. The cabin walls groaned. Snow hammered the roof like a mallet. And then, a crack. Loud. Close. One of the outer cedars had snapped under the weight of packed snow. The fourth test. The family froze. Would one broken tree destroy everything? Elias closed his eyes and listened. The wind rushed through the opening, accelerated, and slammed into the second ring, where the remaining cedars tore it into harmless streams. The cabin shook once, then held. Elias smiled for the first time that night. I was wrong. I thought every tree mattered. It doesn't. The pattern matters. Even if one tree falls, the forest still knows what to do. The fifth test came near dawn, and it was the quietest. The snow piling against the rings had grown so high it began spilling inward, a white tongue creeping toward the woodpile, threatening to seal the door of the only safe home in the valley. So Elias and Noah, father and son, took turns at the window, and each time the tongue advanced, they opened the door into the shrieking dark and cut it back, shovel by shovel, hour by hour. The storm never stopped attacking. They never stopped answering. And then, just before dawn, silence. Instant. Total. Elias opened the door. Towering walls of white surrounded the homestead, some higher than the roof, curved like frozen ocean waves. The outer cedars were buried almost completely, but inside the rings the yard lay under a thin blanket of powder. The path to the woodpile, open. The well, clear. Even the goat shed, untouched. Clara stepped onto the porch with tears in her eyes. This isn't possible. Elias pressed his hand against the nearest drift. Hard as stone. The storm hadn't failed. It had obeyed. The blizzard had built its own prison and trapped itself outside. 3 days later, Silas Mercer crested the eastern ridge and stopped his horse cold. Below him stood a cabin protected inside a fortress of frozen walls. He removed his hat and for a full minute said nothing. Then he whispered the only words that made sense. You never stopped the storm. You simply taught it where to surrender. When the valley finally counted the cost of that winter, the numbers told the whole story. One family had come through untouched. The Rowans, with a baby girl born healthy in February, inside the warmest cabin in the territory. One skeptic, Silas Mercer himself, planted the first cedar on his own land that spring with his own hands. And by the following autumn, 43 families across Blackstone Valley were planting living windbreaks around their homes, using sketches copied from a worn notebook of 15 winters. That notebook never gathered dust. Years later, Elias placed it in Noah's hands the day his son built his own homestead. Noah planted his rings exactly as his father taught him, not because he feared another blizzard, but because he understood the lesson hidden beneath the snow. Some knowledge is too valuable to disappear with one generation. It must be planted, just like a forest. And perhaps that's why this story still matters today. Every generation faces storms that seem impossible to survive. Some arrive as snow. Others arrive as failure, loss, or fear. Most people fight them the old way. Thicker walls, more firewood, and hope. But every once in a while, someone stops asking, "How do I defeat this?" and starts asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Because in the end, the valley never remembered Elias Rowan as the man who planted trees. It remembered him as the man who taught the wind where to surrender. Not every storm comes to destroy you. Some storms come to reveal a path that only those willing to listen will ever find. If this story stayed with you after it ended, that's exactly why we make them. This channel is still small, growing one subscriber at a time, and every person who joins helps keep these forgotten frontier stories alive. If you haven't subscribed yet, it costs nothing, and it means everything. Thank you for spending this time with us. See you in the next story.